Good morning, students. I am Dr. Tripti Gupta from Shivjyoti Education Group, Kota. So, welcome to the English class, students. Today we are going to take up chapter number 8 from Moments. A House is Not a Home by Zan Gudioso. Okay, students. So, let us start with the chapter now. A house is not a home. The story reflects the challenges of being a teenager and the problems of growing up. How does the author overcome his problems? So, this is how the chapter is. He was going through a phase of turmoil in his life. The boy, the narrator here, has been into the middle school up till now, and recently this year he has just left his middle school and he has moved further for his high school, and now his school has been changed. He has joined a new high school, and after leaving that old junior school, he was being a bit unstable here. He was not able to adjust himself in that new setup. Now, it was my first year of high school felt awkward. After leaving junior high at the head of my class with all the seniority the upgrade levels could afford me, it felt strange starting over as a freshman. So, there in his junior school, he was the uppermost, the highest most grade which was studying in that school, and he was been enjoying that seniority in that school. Whereas now here in this high school, he was into the junior most class, and this was a new fresh start for him. The school was twice as big as my old school, and to make matters worse, my closest friends were sent to different high schools. I felt very isolated. So, he was been missing his old school. He found this school to be quite big enough, good with infrastructure, but still he was missing his old junior school. One more reason was all his friends have taken admissions to different high schools, and he was all been alone here, and he was not having all his old friends here. I missed my old teachers so much that I would go back and visit them. They would encourage me to get involved in school activities so that I could meet new people. They told me that in time I would adjust and probably end up loving my new school more than I had my old one. So, that was how he was trying to move back and find his comfort in the old school. He used to visit his teachers, old teachers, and every time whenever he used to go there, his old teachers used to make him comfort and try and make him to understand that he has to move on, he has to try out some more interest in the new activities which were going on in the high school, and so that he can find proper involvement over there and he could adjust well in that new school. They made me promise that when that happened, I would still come by and visit them from time to time. I understood the psychology in what they were saying, but I took some comfort in it nonetheless. Finally, he was still not been accepting that whatever the way they were been trying to make him to involve in that new school, but he was not still been very comfortable over there. Now, when all these things were been happening, one Sunday afternoon, there had a major incident at that time, and it was been a fire which broke out. Not long after I had started high school, I was sitting at home at our dining room table doing homework. It was a cold and windy fall day, and we had a fire going in our fireplace. So, the complete situation was, it was Sunday and he was back from his church, and there on the Sunday they used to have a church service. So, after that church service they were being back, and now the the day was been quite chilly and it was been windy. On that very day he was been sitting on the dining table. So, it was a cold and windy day as we have been discussing. So, they were having a fire at their fireplace and that fire was been giving the warmth to the house. As usual, my red tabby cat was lying on the top of all my papers, purring loudly and occasionally swatting at my pen for entertainment's sake. So, the narrator was having a very loving and pet, that is a tabby red cat, and that cat was very close to the narrator. He was being just moving, purring means making a sound of mewing, okay, and it was been lying there and it was just playing with that pen which was placed on the table as the narrator was doing his homework. So, he was being indulging with the play with his cat. She was never far from me. I had rescued her when she was a kitten, and somehow she knew that I was the one responsible for giving her the good life. So, there was a very nice bond between the cat and the kitten. When it was a small kitten, it was being rescued by the narrator, and that is why that special bond was there. The kitten also grew up all along with narrator, and now the cat was being a wonderful pet, loving pet for the narrator. My mother kept stoking the fire to keep the house nice and warm. Suddenly, I smelled something strange, and then I noticed it, smoke pouring in through the seams of the ceiling. So, what exactly happened was the narrator's mother, she was stoking the fire. What stoking means? She was stirring the coal, so wood, so that fire could be maintained in a proper manner, and while doing that, somehow that there must be some spark which must have been caught by one or the things, and all of suddenly there was a very smell of smoke which was being filling the complete room, and the narrator found that the complete ceiling was being poured, it was pouring the smoke inside the room. The smoke began to fill the room so quickly that we could barely see. So, finally, the smoke was getting inside the room and it was very difficult to view where the door was. We all ran out into the front yard from the front door. By the time we made our way outside, the whole roof was engulfed in flames and it was spreading quickly. So, finally, as they tried to rescue themselves, they just ran out of the front door trying to find out the way in that smoke, and they managed to come out in the front yard, and what they saw was that the complete house was burning. It was been completely buried in the flames and it was been burning vigorously. I ran to the neighbors to call the fire department while I watched my mother run back into the house. So, the next thing which struck him, that he wanted to make a call to the fire department. So, he went to the neighbors, and what he saw that his mother was moving back inside the house, and for what reason she was been going, because she wanted to rescue some of the very important things from the house. My mother then ran out of the house carrying a small metal box full of important documents. She dropped the case on the lawn and in a crazed state ran back into the house. So, for some other reason she again ran back inside the house for a second trip after dropping that metal box which was full of important documents. I knew what she was after. My father had died when I was young, and I was certain that she was not going to let his pictures and letters go up in flames. So, to just rescue all her memories which were there in the form of letters and the photographs which were there of her deceased of husband, she went inside again the house and she was being intently wanted to rescue all those memories. They were the only things that she had to remember him by. Still I screamed at her, "Mom, no." So the narrator was quite worried about her mom because she was going inside the house at the time when it was already been engulfed in the fire. I was about to run after her when I felt a large hand hold me back. It was a fireman. I hadn't even noticed that the street had already filled with the fire trucks. So altogether they found he was been trying to running back into the house after his mother so that he could rescue and help her, but at that same time he found that he was being held back by some person and he was the fireman. The fire extinguisher have already, the trucks, they have arrived the street and finally they were taking charge of rescuing the house and the family. I was trying to free myself from his grasp, yelling, "You don't understand, my mother is in there." So he was trying to fight him so that he could make him to release the narrator, and the reason was that he wanted to take care of, to rescue his mother. He held on to me while other firefighters ran into the house. He knew that I wasn't acting very logically and that if we were to let go, I would run. He was right, and that is how the fireman, he restricted the narrator and held him there tight so that he should not go behind his mother. In the meanwhile, other firefighters, they went inside the house to rescue his mother. "It's all right, they will get her." He was trying to console him that you don't worry, she will be all right, she will be rescued by the firefighters. He wrapped a blanket around me and sat me down in our car. Soon after that, a fireman emerged from our house with my mom in tow. So very soon, when he was being wrapped with the blanket, he was being comforted by the fireman and he was sitting in his car. He found that another fireman, he was coming out giving support to her, to his mother, and finally she was being rescued. He quickly took her over to the truck and put an oxygen mask on her. She was a bit half unconscious. She was unable to breathe properly because must have inhaled lots of smoke. That's why the fireman, he took her to the ambulance, and there she was being on the oxygen. I ran over and hugged her. So out of her concern, he was quite insecure. Maybe the insecurity of losing his mother was overwhelming him, and out of that he just hugged her. All those times I ever argued with her and hated her vanished at the thought of losing her. So he was just being very thoughtful that probably he must have done wrong, he must have argued, and all those negative instances, all those negativities which were there, probably those were been hurting him now, and he was being filled with the feeling that how would have been if he would have lost even her mother also. So that made him to be very frightful of having that insecurity of losing his mother also, though as he has already lost his father. 5 hours later, the fire was finally out. Our house was almost completely burned down, but then it struck me. I hadn't seen my cat. Where was my cat? Much to my horror, I realized that she was nowhere to be found. Finally, after 5 hours, the firefighters, they managed to put off the fire, and somehow they found And all of a sudden it strikes the narrator's mind that he is unable to find his cat anywhere, and he did not find, he has not seen that cat for long. So, where it is now? So, he was being altogether very worried about his cat. Then all at once it hit me, the new school, the fire, my cat. I broke down in tears and cried and cried. I was suffering loss big time. So, the moment he realized that probably that cat may have burnt in the fire and he has lost his cat, made him to just crash down emotionally. He was been thinking about all those things which were been happening on those days, the change in his school, losing all his friends somewhere, all being alone, then the fire, and now finally the loss was unrepairable. He was missing his cat, the cat was not been there, and that made him to finally crash down, and he was being very insecure, and he was feeling grief, deep pain with that loss which he was been suffering from. The firemen wouldn't let us go back into the house that night. It was still too dangerous. Dead or alive, I couldn't imagine leaving without knowing about my cat. Regardless, I had to go. So, finally, the author, the narrator, he and his mother, they both left the place because they were not been allowed by the firemen to go inside the house and to look for the cat. But though he was very curious, he was very reluctant, unwilling to leave the place without knowing about his cat, but there was no way out and they were being forced to move out. We piled into the car with just the clothes on our backs and a few of the firemen's blankets and made our way to my grandparents' house to spend the night. Finally, they left the place and they were just there, they were moving to their grandparents' house because that was the only place left where they could have take shelter for that night when their house was already been damaged completely. So, the next day, Monday, I went to school when the fire broke out. I was still wearing the dress I had worn to church that morning, but I had no shoes. I had kicked them off when I was doing my homework. So, the next day was Monday and he was just being forced by his mother to go to school in that same condition. The reason with which was she wanted him to distract from whatever the thought process, the loss and the complete traumatic experience which he had the previous day, and she wanted to distract his mind make him to come out of that experience, and that is how the only thing which could be done was to make him to go to school. So, the same set of clothes which he was been wearing from the previous day, he went to the school in the same dress, and he was not having his shoes also. So, he borrowed the shoes from his tennis shoes of his aunt, and then he went to school in a very reluctant manner. He was not at all willing, he just wanted to stay back at home, but his mother forced that he should go, and he went. Why couldn't I just stay home from school? My mother wouldn't hear it off, but I was totally embarrassed by everything. So, he was been feeling very embarrassing going over that in that state of mind, as well as physically he was not in a stable state, wearing those clothes which have already been worn out in the fire. So, finally, he was been feeling embarrassed going in that state to his school. The clothes I was wearing looked weird. I had no books or homework, and my backpack was gone. I had my life in that backpack. The more I tried to fit in, the worse it got. I destined to be an outcast and a geek all my life. So, this was how he was been feeling at that time. He was not having his shoes, not having his books, the homework was been burned, his backpack was been burned, and that backpack used to be very dear and near to his heart, because all his secret things, all his memories of his school and important aspects which he used to take care a lot were all been there into the backpack, and he was missing all his stuff while he was going to the school, and he was feeling like that he had been an outcast, the person who has been just excluded out, he was being aloof, all aloof, and feeling very dull, very low, and that is how it was been feeling like, oh, why this has been happened, why this misfortune has come to his life. That is what I felt like. I did not want to grow up, change, or have to handle life if it was going to be this way. I just wanted to curl up and die. So, that the state of mind was being so depressed of that time, at that time of narrator, just because he was been feeling all the things were been going in a negative manner, and he was feeling everywhere that feeling of depression and loss he was been suffering from, and he was not able to come out of that state of mind, and that made him to feel about that probably if the life is going to be so bad to him, that why he should live further, and he wanted that feeling of losing his life came to his mind.